All right. Welcome, Blood of Kings fans, Highlander fans, to Blood of Kings, a Highlander podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. On the show, we cover everything from the Highlander universe. And on this episode, we're going to discuss a special screening of the original 1986 Highlander that included my awesome co-host, Mr. Lee Fillingsness. Lee, come on board here, buddy. How are you?
Well, like you said, I am awesome. I am your co-host. So, I mean, what more could you ask for?
Now, what's interesting about this, the show, was that we were originally just kind of do a little short segment in Joe's because we want to kind of get back to doing Joe's again. But it turns out, though, that you included a nice little interview with the person in question, and we'll get to that in a second. But more importantly, though, seeing Highlander on the big screen is not something a lot of people can say that they did. There are, of course, quite a few that they can, but I'm talking about Highlander fans in general because here in the States, it didn't last very long. It was more popular overseas. But what we're talking about here is that you actually got to experience seeing it on the big screen. And I remember we had teased it kind of before. You weren't sure if you were going to be involved with it. And then I said, dude, you got to get involved with this. Mm-hmm. And, you were like, you got in touch with the theater and, this is the original Highlander, man. Here we got a picture, of course, from the scene from the film with Ramirez training Connor himself. I have not seen Highlander on the big screen yet. I would love to see this 4K restoration. But you, sir, you got to see it on the big screen at your local theater, or one of your local theaters, and that is the Parkway Theater. Tell us how this came about.
Well, my buddy Earl Lux, who, like yourself, is a Wilbur Hood impersonator, character from Star Wars, otherwise known as Ice Cream Maker Man.
Not impersonator, costumer.
Costumer. Sorry, I could not think in my head cosplayer.
We Star Wars fans like to cosplay as Wilbur Hood, the guy that had the ice cream maker in Empire Strikes Back, and it's kind of become a cult.
But he owned this theater for a very long time, and he is a fan of movies, not film, not cinema, where you have to be, pinkies in the air and talk about denouement and that sort of stuff. He likes movies for what they are. And good movies, bad movies, he plays them all. He did this thing called trailer trash, where he just have like the worst movies possible, stuff that just should never have been made.
What's his name again?
Earl Lux, Luckes.
Okay. Is he a new owner?
No, he's the original owner. He still helps because these are the old projectors. So not too many people around still know how to run them. So he still helps with a lot of that.
Okay. Well, I'm for the YouTube channel here. If you're listening to this, make sure you check out the YouTube podcast for this episode on Blood of Kings. I'm posting some pictures of the Parkway Theater, and I have the right theater, right, Lee?
Yes, sir. That is the Parkway.
Now, I found some information about this theater that I wanted to share. First of all, the address is 4814 Chicago Way in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Is that correctly?
Yeah, and it is just about a mile south of where the George Floyd incident 2 years ago. So it's very much a part of the city. It's also, I know the owners of the bar next door and the barbershop across the street. So it's very much a local feeling, very important to the movie crowd in the Twin Cities.
Well, I found some history about this theater, and I think it's important because a lot of these cool art house theaters are still around the country, and especially during the pandemic, it was tough that some of these theaters came back. And I wanted to know if this stuff is true, because I had to kind of do a little, internet sleuthing here. And this is what I found. The Parkway Theater, the small 630 seat Parkway Theater opened in 1931, a simple neighborhood house on the southern edge of Minneapolis. By the early 1970s, its then owner decided to switch to pornographic films in order to stay afloat. However, not long after, Bill Irvine, who was the manager of the theater at the time, purchased the theater and started to screen art and foreign features. In 2006, the ownership was taken over by William and Susan Senker, owners of the Pepito's Mexican restaurant in the adjoining building. A common
so good.
Okay, yeah, good. A common walkway was reopened, and the theater in function became part of Pepito's. The renovation and restoration began in 2006 and continues today. The Art Deco style Parkway Theater remains one of the only single screen movie houses in operation in the Twin Cities, renowned for its unusual and offbeat film variety, as for its homemade popcorn and fresh butter. Is this pretty accurate description?
Yeah, they left Earl out, but yeah, that's pretty accurate. And also, they have a very nice collection of whiskey to enjoy with your film. So that's kind of nice.
Okay, all right. Well, I wanted to share. Here's a couple pictures that I've already shown, but I wanted to share this here. I thought this was pretty cool. That 2020, it won an award for Best of Twin Cities, and there was a quote here saying, "There's something for everyone at the Parkway, and the theater will immediately make you feel at home as soon as you step inside. Best concert venue, City Pages 2020."
Yeah, and City Pages, kind of the local rag. It's not like the main newspaper, but it's the one that everyone actually likes reading.
Right.
So getting recognition from the City Pages is always pretty good. And they do this kind of stuff. They have best Bloody Mary, best this, best that, and the other, and it's always kind of fun to find out. And it was a long time coming for the Parkway.
Well, you found out that Highlander was going to be not filming there, but be showing there, be screening here. And I have a picture of the event here. As you see, it was scheduled for Thursday, February 24th, 2022 at 8 p.m., of course, there at the Parkway Theater. And they had you could buy your tickets online, and there's a little more about the information here. Thursday night cult classic. The Parkway Theater requires proof of COVID-19 vaccination or negative test results for all that enter. Requirements for theater entry can be found at your local website. 7 p.m., the doors opened. 8 p.m. was a screening. Looks like you had to pay only $9 in advance, which is nice. $12 at the door, still a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Ticket purchases are final and non-refundable. Directed by Russell McKay, rated R. An immortal Scottish swordsman, Christopher Lambert, must confront the last of his remaining opponents. Also immortal, a murderously brutal barbarian who lusts for the fabled prize, all while following two simple rules. 1, there can be only one. And 2, no fighting in church.
Yeah, that gets to the point. And it was supposed to be a very full house, but we had a pretty good storm that afternoon. And the roads, I almost didn't make it myself. It took me 45 minutes to drive 12 miles.
Wow.
But I was not going to miss out on the chance to not only see this, but also host it. I was looking forward to it.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that real quick. Tell us how you got in there a little bit more and to actually hosting this event.
Well, I was invited by a friend of mine, a director-producer here in town, Nathan Block. I've worked with several times. He's like, "Lee, you got to come. They got Highlander showing," and I'm like, "Cool." And I reached out, started talking to some people online about it, and it just kind of got bandied around that I should do something because we have a lot of listeners to our podcast here in the Twin Cities, and so Earl actually reached out to the new owners of the theater and got me in there. They're like, "Okay, what is it you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I host a podcast based on this movie and the franchise." And they're like, "Oh, really? We didn't." And it's just they're like, "What do you think you could do?" And I just kind of did like an intro. And I'll admit that I stole very liberally from Jonathan Melville's book. Some fun little behind the scenes tidbits. It was a weird mix in the crowd. It was a whole bunch of people our age, and then quite a few like 20 somethings. And it was about 60-40 of people that hadn't seen it versus people that had. So a lot of first timers. So I just kind of went in on the rock and roll route, kind of talked about how he had the first video on MTV, or Russell McKay had the first video on MTV. How Sting actually recommended Clancy Brown for the role, all the weird little things. And then, me, if you listen to the podcast, I love to talk about Bob Anderson and Peter Diamond. So told that, let everyone know that Christopher Lambert was learning English as he was learning his lines, and did a little trivia contest, gave away some free drinks, which made me some friends. So
That's really, really cool. So can you say what type, like what other questions were you asking, and how well did people do?
Well, we got answers to all the questions. Because it was a nerdy enough crowd, and you know how you can spot us by our T-shirts.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, we already mentioned that Peter Diamond was in Star Wars. What other two actors have appeared in the Star Wars franchise? And I was kind of thinking, okay, I would just take one, but one dude in the back row, I wish I could remember his name, but he knew not only was Hugh Quarshie in episode 1, but he also played Captain Panaka. And it's like,
Yeah.
this is my man. This dude right here is exactly who should be at the Highlander screening. This is he, like he was my hero at that moment. I'm like, dude, I love you. But ask that, trying to remember, had a couple other really good ones. But what year was Connor McLeod born? How many sequels were there? Was another one, and how many seasons of television were there? And it was a trick question because nobody thought about the animated series. So
I don't have the picture handy, but you sent me a picture of you on stage. You're holding some drink up. You brought some props. You had a couple of the swords there. Tell me about that picture of yours.
Well, that was me. Despite being a performer, I always get like a little bit of stage fright. So a little sip of something from the Highlands always helps me relax a bit. I only had like one sip, but just to get the burn in my chest. But yeah, I had some whiskey in my hand. Didn't want to have too much because I was gonna, play with the swords a little bit. But
Right.
Since I do have a proper reproduction of the Highlander 1 sword, actually made by Daryl Kyle out in Texas Steel Props, and I have the Kurgan sword. Like, why wouldn't I bring that? Of course, everyone wants to see it. And before the show, everyone's like, dude, can I touch it? Like,
Can I touch the sword? Can I touch the sword? Well, the only way I've ever seen Highlanders on video, and in one form or another, and of course, this was the first way. Right here, I'm holding the original Highlander on VHS in the hard clamshell case that you probably saw.
Can I hear the case?
Okay, yeah, hold on. Here you go. Ready? Oh, yeah, look at that.
Memories like the corners of my mind.
Hold on, I'm not done. You gotta snap it. There you go. So you guys watching it on video, you can definitely see. Yeah, but I mean, it's just, I love old VHS, man. Let me look at this thing. It's just so cool, with the two-toned tape color there with the is, and yeah, EMI Screen Entertainment, Thorn EMI Screen Entertainment. Yep, and I just love that, the weight of a good old VHS tape. But one of these days, Lee, I will see it on the big screen. So now the cool thing about this event was that you had someone special experience this for the first time. And as Highlander fans, Lee, you and I love it when we introduce Highlander to new people. So you have a student, if I remember correctly,
yes,
by the name of Christa Rose, who, first of all, how did you bring up this subject with her about seeing this film?
Well, she's probably my most regular student. I do private martial arts instruction, and usually I do about 1 or maybe 2 hours at a time. She books me for 3 to 4 hours at a time every week. Really a very dedicated student, really good at what she does. I've hung some great fight scenes on her, and including actually the picture that kind of accompanies this episode is from the most recent one.
This one right here.
Yep. Where she looks really good and I look Jabba-esque, shall we say? But
did you just look like a big gigantic villain? That's all it is, right?
True.
There. So,
I also, just so we could frame it, I actually am like almost kneeling. So that's how, like, I'm like shrunk down about 9-10 inches just so that we can get that, because yeah, she comes up about to my second rib.
Is she holding a suppressed Walther weapon there?
Yes, she is a suppressed Walther PPK. That the set, she's playing a spy, and I had just gotten this thing, and I'm like, oh, we're using this in the movie, and the director's like, well, in the script we have a knife, and I'm like, well, you can rent the knife, or I've got this and I can make a better fight with it. And he's like, well, I mean, we're not shooting. And I'm like, I know, she's going to pistol whip somebody with this. And he's like,
So,
pistol whip? And I'm like, yeah.
so a little more info about Christa was that she had never seen Highlander before, right?
Yeah. And I thought it was kind of an interesting, because she is an actress, because she is obviously very deeply involved in the fight world now. Like I said, she's a very dedicated student. I really wanted to get her perspective on it. And I also, because she's about 20 years younger than us, she's going to see this with different eyes than you and I saw it.
True. Yeah.
I mean, we can readily say that the very different set of morals growing up when we did versus now. So I think gave a good perspective. And like you said, we're always excited to introduce this to people. I was a little nervous because I'm like, oh, there's some stuff in here that the whole conversation about the speculation of why Nash went down to the garage. That's not exactly the conversation you would have in a movie these days.
That's an excellent point. So she was obviously open to this because she knew you and trusted you. Was this the type of genre that you think she would be interested in?
Yes, just in knowing how she appreciates the technical side of the work. A lot of actors show up, kind of put their best side forward and say their lines, and they say them well. I notice when I've worked with her, she's really involved in where the camera is. She's really involved in the character. Even if we don't know anything about it, she wants to know.
Gotcha.
So she sees those things. And I knew that she would see that part. And also just the fights. And I did give her a little bit of information before. And I'm like, there are shots in this movie that had never been done before.
Yeah.
Yep. And so she kept her eyes open for those. And well, I mean, you'll hear her response to it. It's pretty interesting.
Well, what Lee means by that is you actually recorded an interview with her on Zoom, and we're basically going to play that whole interview, getting a first person's reaction to the film, which I find fascinating. And I think it's important for Highlander fans to, like you say, get an experience a different perspective on the film, because we're so invested in it. We've seen it so many times, but seeing it through a fresh set of eyes like Christa did, I think it's important to get a reaction from her regarding that, right?
Yeah. And it also bears mentioning, we're a couple of dudes and she's a lady, so she's going to see things through a different lens. And she has some very interesting insights on Brenda and Rachel and Heather.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to play that video for you, which, as you're listening to this, it's just going to be the audio part of it. But if you actually want to see the video, make sure you're watching it on YouTube. Now, there was a little technical glitch halfway through the interview, Lee. So what we're going to do actually is I'm just going to pause it there while that glitch happens. And we're just going to play the FPNet break and then come back and then start it up where the glitch fixed itself, and we'll just hopefully make that as seamless as possible.
Yeah, there was a couple of mortals had a duel outside her house, and it just kind of messed with the lights for a second. So,
all right, well, let's go ahead and get into this interview, and let's go ahead and have Lee introduce Christa Rose here. So here we go. Let's go ahead and get this going here.
I obviously know you pretty well, but our listeners don't. Why don't you tell them who you are?
Yeah, well, my name is Christa Rose, and I am an actor and model and martial artist here in the Twin Cities area. I work closely with Lee. We do a lot of fight coordination and fight training stuff on film. We've done sword fights. We've done a lot of Highlander-looking stuff.
Well, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get
there, but we've also done some tactical combat fights and stuff like that. So that's what I do.
Well, my favorite with you was your double daggers versus two guys, one with a spear and one with a longsword. And those of you watching on our YouTube channel just in telling the difference between the size of my giant head and your petite and ladylike head, you can tell just the size. But you're, shall we say, a petite person, but
yeah,
I'd say that you do kick full-size ass.
I might have to agree with you, Lee.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
So tell us what got you into acting.
To be honest with you, I made movies with my siblings when I was a kid, and you know, they were all a lot older, and I was around 8 to 10. And you know, I remember waking up on those mornings that we made those movies, and I was the actress. My brother was the DP. My other oldest sister, of course, was the director, and my middle sister was the AD. And so I just remember waking up those mornings and being shaking, excited as a kid just to act on film.
And real quick for everyone listening, DP in our world means director of photography, and AD means assistant director. So,
thanks, Lee.
Sorry, we have our own shorthand in this world, and you know, I could make a bajillion Highlander jokes that would go right over your head. So, I want to make sure everyone's in the same place. So,
exactly. But yeah, that's what got me into acting. I realized that was the one thing that I had passion toward, and one thing that I wanted to do with my life. And after college, I decided to jump in and dive into it, and I haven't looked back since.
So, what got you into action? Because that's an interesting role to take, and you know, you're very good at it, but it's harder for women to get into it than men, I've found.
Yeah, it definitely, I think it definitely is. I've always been an adventurous person. I've always loved just, I don't know, being out there, doing physical activities. I never had the chance to do martial arts or anything like that until the movie Valinor, which is a feature film directed by Tazariah Wolf, Ryan Steenerson, and John Heller. And that's actually where I met you, Lee, was on that film. And my character was an assassin princess. And so she had to carry around this huge katana, and she had to fight many, many people. And so that was my first time even holding a katana on that set. And so just Lee was there. Lee was the stunt coordinator, kind of the one directing the fights. And I'm sorry, fight coordinator.
Yep.
And
I prefer fight monkey, but you know,
fight
potato,
monkey.
tomato.
And so that's where we met, and we started working on after that. I mean, that just sparked a flame in me. I didn't realize that there's such a big passion in me for sword fighting and just pretty much any type of fighting, mixed martial arts, what we do. And so I started taking lessons from you weekly for, gosh, it's been over a year now.
Year and a half, I think, coming up next month.
Yeah, so it's been a whirlwind since then, but I have never found so much joy in doing something than martial arts and acting together. It's incredible.
Well, and you know, out there, a lot of our listeners know that I love to give people nicknames, and you got one of my favorite nicknames on that first day on set of Valinor. There was the lovely Christa Rose and another actress whose name was also Christa. And I was giving direction for the fights and kind of working, and I could not remember your character names for the love of God. And so I just kept on saying, Christa, no, not that Christa, that Christa. And finally it's just like, okay, because you're the hero, you're good Christa. And because the other one was the villain, she's evil Christa. And you're still in my phone, both as good and evil Christa. So everyone out there, we are actually in the presence of good Christa today.
Indeed you are.
And more recently, Action Christa. But I will say, as your instructor, it's been very interesting seeing your growth and the ways that you find meaning in fighting, and your extreme nimbleness and flexibility with being able to do a lot of different things. You know, we just finished a big kind of modern tactical style fight, which, you know, after doing katana and double daggers, it's a big shift. And you did that very well. And at the end of the fight, I came over to you, and do you remember what I said?
You said almost every move I did in that fight was left-handed.
And did you even notice before you did the fight?
I had no idea.
Yeah. So
I had no idea. And I'm right-handed.
Yeah. So anybody out there that you know, wants to hire you know, a ninja with awesome hair, and I'm not available, Christa is right there for us. but a lot of actors and fighters think that they're not left-handed, and I just noticed that as long as you weren't focusing on it, your left is really good. And so I just kind of put the choreography in there, and you're like, yeah, this is what my character would do. Boom. And you had just one right-handed strike at all. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was crazy to realize afterward. It was definitely cool for me too.
Yeah. And so the reason I have you on, and the reason why we're both here is we got to do something kind of cool last week. You want to tell everybody what it was?
We got to see the premiere of Highlander.
Yeah. On the big screen, which a lot of Highlander fans, including my co-host Kevin, the Raider nerd Reitzel, has not seen on the big screen yet. So now my first time was watching it on VHS back in the 1900s, and the first time I saw it on screen, I had maybe been a little too in character for a Scottish film. I don't remember most of it after enjoying some Scottish national beverages. So this was my first time being aware that I was in a movie theater watching Highlander. Now, before you came to the showing, were you familiar at all with the movie, the franchise, the concept at all?
No.
No? Just what pray tell brought you there? Well, my really intelligent and smart and passionate teacher said this is the best movie ever, and he was right. Thank you so much for saying that. You're right. I really am intelligent and smart and the best. I didn't say that, but you're right.
I really couldn't have said it better, Lee.
Said what? You said all of that. I said nothing.
Oh, right. Exactly.
But yes, I dragged you and your husband to it, and
yeah,
it was interesting watching the both of you. I was trying not to do that thing like, enjoy my favorite movie. You have to.
I could tell you're holding yourself back. You're like trying not to talk throughout the whole thing, like point things out. Oh, this is this. This is this.
there was a couple times I had to, but I could have. Our mutual friend Callan, she's gotten into the habit of handing me the remote control if we watch anything, because she knows I'm going to pause and explain something for 5 minutes every other scene.
Oh, that's funny.
So you walked in really knowing nothing other than some old guy really likes this movie. As you walked out, what were your impressions? How did you feel about the movie?
When I walked out,
yeah.
Oh gosh. I was speechless after the film. And there's only been one other film in my life that's really left me speechless, and that was the most recent Les Mis that came out with Anne Hathaway and Russell Crowe. That one moved. It's not like it takes an incredible film to make me speechless. I've seen plenty of incredible films. It takes a powerful film to leave you speechless, and the way the story was told, how long it felt, just how it kind of played with your expectations a little bit. It just was one of those films that I just couldn't say anything afterward. I had to just kind of soak it in, like, okay, what do I do with my life now? I just watched 4, 5, 6 lifetimes, and now I have to like reconcile with my own life, and it was awesome. It was thought provoking.
That is awesome to hear, because when you introduce somebody to one of your favorite movies, you never want to hear like, oh, that was a movie. Yeah, great. I think a lot of our listeners out there, if they're listening to a Highlander podcast on the regular basis, they probably enjoy the movie. So I think they're glad to have another one amongst our number. Now, you were talking about how you felt like the length of time. Could you go into that a little bit more, kind of what you were feeling on that? Because you actually had some interesting comments after the film.
Yeah, again, it's rare that you find a film that kind of messes with your perception of time. The film was, I think, 2 hours. It felt like a 4-hour film, but in the best way, because some films that I've sat through, I'm like, okay, when is this over? And it definitely feels like 4 hours, and you're bored, you're kind of like, okay, I just want this to be over with. That didn't really happen with this film. It was entertaining the entire way through, even though it felt like 4 hours. And I think the reason that it did was, I mean, there's so many reasons why, but the fact that he was living multiple, the main character, Connor, was living multiple lives. And he's just, there's so many characters, there's so many different shots, there's so many different sets and scenes and locations. It just felt like it kept going on. And I couldn't help but feel like there's many lifetimes lived within that film.
Well, I think it's in a lot of ways due to Russell McKay. Now, by the time this comes out, our previous listeners will know that I actually hosted this event as well. So I kind of did a little bit of a pre-show, and I talked about the director who was basically, he directed the first music video ever shown on MTV, and he directed a whole bunch of them, through the 80s. And I realized about halfway through my diatribe that music videos were pretty much gone by the time you were of age to watch them. Because MTV basically had become reality television and not much else. Yeah. But it was a huge thing for us in the 80s. And one of the things is they would have 3 to 5 minutes to tell these epic stories. Mm. And I think that when you watch the way that Russell did this movie, it's like this series of epic vignettes, and you have a complete story in them. But what he also had was, because he had this weird timeline that he had to follow, he could do whatever he wanted. Now, on the technical side, what did you kind of notice, from just the filming? Because, I mean, you're already talking about the way that everything was made you feel like you were living lifetimes. Anything technically you noticed that added to that effect?
I think the overall dramatic feel of each shot. I mean, again, like even just in the beginning, that first scene of the auditorium, of all the people raging and the fight going on, and the use of the Skycam. I know you mentioned in the beginning with some of that trivia that was one of the first times the Skycam was used in film. And it was, that first sweeping shot was just incredible. It was charged with energy. It was powerful. I was almost speechless at that point and captivated at that point, because again, even though I've seen Skycam used before, even though I've seen all of that, I still felt like it was a new thing. It still felt new. I don't know why. But stuff like that was riddled throughout the entire film. I mean, we had unique shots, literally from the transitions, like when they're on the water and Connor and Sean Connery's character, they're on the water, and he's teaching him how to swim, which doesn't really happen.
I cannot swim. I'm a man, not a fish.
Exactly. That transition, even from them being above water and then going straight down underneath, that was incredible. I mean, there's tons of transitions we could talk about. I mean, they were all captivating. But that one in particular, really, I was like, wait, how did they do that? Because again, you go back to the 80s types films, there's so many realistic things that you have to think through. It's not just everything's, CG. Everything is just, we can fix that in post. Like, a lot of it has to be done right on set. And I think that added to my wonder of the movie and how did this work? How is this made? So I think I'm digressing a little bit, but I think a lot of those unique shots and their purposeful choices in them is what made it, again, feel way longer than just a 2-hour movie.
Oh, interesting. And you're talking about that opening scene at the wrestling match. I don't know if you know this, but a couple of guys in that ring are locals. They're our neighbors. Jim Brunzell and Greg Gagne. They were the Killer Bees. Was kind of their wrestling duo when I was a kid. So that's kind of how I got to know them. But the Twin Cities Film Festival, which you've been to, we did the we were one of the few people that showed up for the Halloween costume party in costume this year. By the way, your costume was so awesome.
Thanks to Bronson.
Yep.
Bronson, our costumer.
But yeah, they debuted a film about Ric Flair, another kind of crazy 80s wrestler. If you've ever heard people go, woo, that's Ric Flair. But yeah, those guys are local. I always got to throw out my favorite transition when Connor gets thrown out of his village and he just looks directly into camera, and it transitions to that mural of the Mona Lisa on Hudson Street as he's walking into his apartment. Or I just thought, wow, who even thinks to do that?
Yeah. I didn't even, that was another great one. I think it had a lot of meaning too.
And so we kind of got that. There was some stuff with the fights. I always kind of like talking about those. But in the final fight, there was a few movements that they do with the camera that sort of changed the way that we shoot fights in general now. Because they just kind of do a wide shot, and they just kind of let people hack and bash. Because it's hard to follow the intricacies of swordplay. It's hard to follow, the actors moving, because no matter how much we always try to hit our mark exactly, you get the adrenaline, you get all that stuff going. But they really, because you have the best in the business for the fight choreographers, and you've got this, mad genius in Russell Mulcahy directing, and you got Terry Winter. Like, I told that story about how he got the job and he walked off of his sailboat and just signed the sailboat over to his best friend, wasn't even wearing shoes. He's like, yeah, I got to go to New York and film a movie. Like, you've got that guy as the director of photography. I mean, like, this is going to be crazy. But there was some sweeping boom shots. They used the sky cam. They literally call it an opera shot now. When you've got this enormous wide shot that zooms in on the two guys fighting as they're going. You do just some really crazy stuff. They're playing with lenses all over the place. Stuff that, you and me kind of sit there and wait to figure out exactly, okay, what's my frame when we're acting. And frame is like, what part of me is visible? So I just know what to act with.
Exactly. Save your energy.
And a lot of times, as the enormous person, being mean to small petite people like yourself, usually all that's in frame is like my shoulder or a butt cheek or like a fist, but you need to know that. But the way that these guys plays with lens was really something. But that said, you can't talk about Highlander without talking about the fights. As a burgeoning ninja yourself, give me your thoughts.
I was soaking all of them in. I mean, it was sword fighting. How often do you see that, especially in the modern settings? I mean, that was just beautiful. I loved seeing it. I especially loved the sets that they had in New York City in particular, especially that first fight scene when Brenda watches the fight between the Kurgan and Connor. The smoke, the sparks, the colored lights that they had. I mean, everything. It just added to this grunge, futuristic, but also past kind of theme. And I thought that actually really added to the fight scene. And I know it's oftentimes stuff like that can kind of take away from the fight scene and, the swords and, even just certain moves. It really didn't. I think it really added to the mystery of why they're even using swords in the first place and not just a gun and not just, any other weapon of their choice. So I think that part I particularly really liked about the fights.
And you're like, why don't they just use a gun? You just basically went into every topic thread on all of the Highlander Facebook pages and message boards. Like, I just use a gun. There's always that guy. But that is one of the things that kind of made this movie so unique. There had been like a James Bond movie where they had like some modern swordplay, or two of them actually. One of the Roger Moore ones, and then You Only Live Twice. But even then, it was kind of more silly. This one was when you have a super spy using a sword, and like, okay, I guess it makes sense. But when you have some random guy at a wrestling match going into a parking lot and cutting a dude's head off,
right.
That's how you open the movie.
I think that scene actually set the stage for, we're not screwing around with swords. Like, this is actually like, it set the gravity for the sword play, I think, in the entire film, because I didn't expect the guy's head to get, cut off. I didn't expect all the cars to start, just everything that happened in that scene. It showed the gravity and the power of what was going on. And I think if anyone was making fun of it up until that point, they stopped, because it's like, well, this is serious. We're not screwing around. We're not just fencing here.
Yeah. And now, fair to say that was probably your favorite fight in the film?
I think so. I don't know. That's hard to say.
Yeah, it can be a little, it's hard to pick a favorite. It's like children. You don't want to tell them all that it's Kevin, but it is.
Right. It's between the first and last. I can't really, I mean, the last fight was so epic, so it's like, well, how do you not pick that one? I don't know. I think if we're just talking about weapons, I probably, and just like the logistics of the actual fight itself, I probably like the first one better. I think if we're talking the story behind the fight or within the fight, I probably like the last one best. And that's probably because Brenda saves the day.
Yeah.
I thought that part was so interesting. She's tied up to a sign in the beginning when they first start fighting, and the sign is falling, starting to crumble. And I literally expected Connor to stop what he was doing and go over, untie her, try and save her. But he didn't, and the sign fell. And I think that part really spoke to me, because I was expecting her to die at that point, because I'm like, well, clearly no one's there to save her. But how the story was written and how her character recovered from it was so incredible. She saved herself, and you just don't see that. And even films nowadays, you don't see that super often. And even at the very end, when she saves Connor, that was just a powerful narrative to me, that even though she wasn't the one with the sword, she still held a lot of the victory in that fight.
Yeah. And oddly enough, one of our super secret handshake clubs here on Blood of Kings, we have Team Iron Pipe. And that was the second iron pipe used in the movie to attack somebody when there was no sword around. But through all of the movies, an iron pipe just shows up, or in the TV shows, like they just
Seriously?
like, oh no, I lost my sword. Oh, good. Here's an iron pipe. And they just start beating the crap out of somebody. But now I kind of nudged you a little bit in the theater and pointed out, but the shot when Kurgan goes after Brenda, and Connor kind of steps in and does the block.
Yeah.
We all crib, like I'm a martial artist. I didn't make up any new moves. Same thing with fight choreography. But I gave you that same move. You were saving your screen boyfriend from your screen brother in a fight, doing the same thing, except your screen brother had a 6-foot-long spear, and you had to stop it with a dagger that's about 18 inches long. And you did it very believably, and you whipped 7 shades of snot out of him. And let me tell you, he deserved it. You hear me, Jake? You deserved it.
I love you, Jake, but you did deserve it. No, that was I can't say I wasn't a little scared, but yeah, when you pointed that out, I was like, oh my gosh, I did that in a film too.
Yeah.
It felt so much more epic knowing like they did it in Highlander.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Well, it's a shot that I hadn't actually recreated anywhere yet. And being a huge fan of Highlander, I wanted to show that. I wanted it to be, something a little bit more, like you said, epic. You want to have that feeling of, you being heroic instead of just, fighting. Like you've got that save the day moment, which was pretty cool. Save the day and kick the ass.
That should be on a shirt.
Yeah, that'll be the slogan for my new school. So we already started talking a little bit about Brenda saving herself. As an actress, give me your thoughts on her character.
Yeah, I really liked Brenda. I liked how they made her more analytical, more scientific, more the detective on the hunt. You know, I think that really, again, that gave her a little bit of a different role as a woman in that way, and it made her a little bit more powerful, I think. But also, I loved. I think it was Roxanne Hart who played Brenda. She really put her like best foot forward in this case. She put the work in, you know, and I just saw her heart in the character, that commitment. And honestly,
no pun intended.
Oh, right. You know what I'm saying. But
everyone now knows why I like telling jokes around Christa, because we get that laugh every time. See, right there.
Oh man, shoot. You got me again. No, but that's something that I noticed throughout the whole film, is that all of the characters, all of the people that were in it, they just seem to be putting so much of their heart into their character and so much commitment toward it. And I don't know if that type of investment or even stake in a film is seen very often. Sometimes for us actors, it's, you know, it can just be a job, and sometimes it's a passion project, and and you can put everything that you are into the character. I really feel like, you know, Roxanne did that for Brenda, and honestly, I feel like a lot of other characters did that. You could just feel it emulating from the screen.
Oh, interesting. And now we have a couple other. You're talking about the other actors. I did want to talk about the other female characters, Heather and Reitzel. Now, what were your thoughts on them?
I loved how they told their part of the story. I think I didn't draw the conclusion until afterward that Reitzel was the child that he had saved initially. But after seeing that, I recognized that childlikeness that she kept in her character, even as she was an adult. She had such tender love for him, but it was out of gratitude and depth. It wasn't out of, oh, like I'm going to throw myself at you. And it was just really beautiful to see. It was, I think she played that really well. And Heather's character, I mean, she was really, I think she really told the story well. You know, I think a character like her, she could just be like, oh, well, I'm just going to be, you know, the wife, I'm just going to be the love interest. But she added a lot more to it. She wasn't just that. She added so much more depth and commitment to the character, to where we felt that love on screen. And it didn't feel fake to me. So.
Yeah. And that is something, you know, when you think about an enduring performance, I mean, what Beatty Edney did as Heather, I think really stands out. Now, there's an interesting thing about Rachel's character. In the original theatrical release, they did not have the scene in the beginning, or the scene of her being rescued as a child. So I didn't see that until maybe 1995, 1996, whenever the director's cut came out. It also didn't have Bassett shooting his servant at the end of the duel on Boston Common, which I remember seeing that and being like, what? How did this just become more awesome? He's just murdering that guy. This is insane. I love it. But
it seems fitting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if anybody deserves to be shot, it's that guy. But one of the things about 2 years ago, we were kind of talking about this movie in anticipation of the big anniversary. And by the way, it's 36 years ago last week that Highlander debuted on screen in the United States, March 7th. So we almost got it on the anniversary. But without that scene in the movie, nothing Connor does is heroic. Because prior to that, he didn't know anything about Reitzel. So when he goes and fights the Frasers at the beginning, with the clan, he's just fighting them because he's part of the clan. That's his duty. When he's goes down to the parking garage, he is no more guilty or innocent than Facile is. And it's just that one little introduction that takes him from being a protagonist to being the good guy. Because otherwise, everything's in his own interest. So,
looking back at that really does add a lot more depth to his character. I can't really. I'm trying to imagine what the film would be like without that scene, because that was one of the points of the movie where I was like, oh, he has a good heart. That's the first time I thought that in the movie. Like, you kind of know he's a good guy, but a lot of people are. That's doesn't really set you up as a hero being just a good person. It's someone who does something heroic.
So speaking of setting him up as a good person, give me your thoughts on Connor, on Christophe Lambert, on, seeing it as an audience member, as an actor. They brought him in because of his extreme sex appeal originally. He had just done Greystoke for Legend of Tarzan. Of course, he's French, so everyone was like, "Ooh la la!" But give me your take on Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod.
Honestly, I would have thought his accent was on purpose. Like, the part where the policeman asks him, you talk funny, where are you from? And he says, I'm from many places. I know on purpose, like, he's supposed to sound like he is from many places. But at the beginning in the trivia, you had mentioned that he was just learning English on the set and of this film. And that gave me a much better background for understanding what kind of accent does he have and how is he mixing this, and why certain scenes, it seemed like he was maybe not hitting the words exactly the way that I probably would, or maybe a normal, I don't know, someone who like kind of understood more. And I know you talked about that at the beginning, and that helped me understand. And it also kind of gave me a fun behind the scenes view into why he talked that way, or why he had certain moments where the words just didn't really seem to click with the emotions. So
now, as for the character of Connor, what are your thoughts?
That's a good question. I don't know. He had an interesting character arc. At first, I was like, okay, he's just a very, angry, quiet person. Like, who is this person? And it kind of took a while to figure out why he was the way he was. And, I think through seeing him in relationship with other people, and seeing his younger self and seeing the whole story behind it, I think that was a really cool way to tell his story as the character, instead of just trying to, I don't know, all the other ways that you can tell a character story. But yeah, I really thought that was
all right, we're going to pause it right there, Lee. This is where we had a little break in the thing here, but this is a good time for getting into the FPNet break. But this is fascinating interview thus far, just seeing her perspective. Krista's really diving deep in this. You're doing a good job with this, man.
Yeah. Well, like I said, she's a fantastic student. And not only just of punching things, but of motivation, the philosophy behind martial arts, that a lot of people pay lip service to, and they'll have like an inspirational quote. She'll come to me constantly, and she'll be reading the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, which was kind of compiled from notes by Bruce Lee, and she'll ask me stuff about that, and she'll ask me stuff about works from Dan Millman, and we're constantly talking philosophy. So she's capable of some very interesting, complex, and deep thought, which is why I thought, we should probably introduce her to Highlander and bring her on, because let's just say we need to pretty up this dynamic that we got going on here. Two middle-aged dudes with facial hair. Having Christa on definitely brightens the place up a bit.
All right. Well, let's. And what we're going to do is take a little break from this interview and the immortality of Highlander universe, and we're gonna let you know what else is happening on the Fandom Podcast Network. Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom. All right, welcome back to Bloody Kings. We are discussing Highlander, the 1986 Parkway Theater screening with you, Lee, and your friend Christa Rose. She's been giving a great interview here. Looking forward to getting back in the rest of this. I did want to ask you, though, she's obviously done some martial arts with you and stuff like that, but obviously she knows other things as well as being an actor and stuff. What through her training has impressed you the most?
There's a specific way I teach. It's more kinesiological, and it takes a lot to get past, especially for actors, performance versus performing. You want to make it look like this big epic movement rather than actually have the effect. She grasped the notion of like the actual effect, the what we call the ura in Japanese martial arts, kind of the hidden meaning, very quickly. And while she doesn't get it right away on any technique, nobody does. She knows that it's there, and it just has this just burning need to find it every time. And she will be working on heavy bags, and you could see in that picture that you just put up, I'm actually kneeling so that we can kind of be in frame there. I'm actually about 6 or 7 inches taller than that compared to her. But she'll hit a 180-pound Florida hook heavy bag, and she'll fold it in half, and she's like, I wasn't doing it right. And she knows like there's something more. And so she's actually searching for the meaning, the power, all the kind of the stuff that gets dismissed as esoteric. She's touched on that several times, and so she knows it. And she's really picked it up faster than just about anybody I've trained with. I've worked with, professional athletes. When I fought for the University of Iowa, I was coaching there as well. And so I was taking people that were already at a certain level and giving them 3% more. But what she's doing starting from day one, no experience, to where she's at now, is monumental growth. So she just impresses me with her ability to find that.
Well, she is lucky enough to have seen Highlander on the big screen, and so let's go ahead and get back to her interview here. You're doing a great job, and I'm curious to see what else that she has to say.
So as I was kind of telling everyone, I assume that everything you just said about Connor was incredibly well thought out and insightful, but
It was.
Could you perhaps repeat some of that for us?
Sure. I guess the biggest thing that stood out for me was that his character arc was very gradual. You know, I think so often in films nowadays, when we see hero characters, we find out very quickly who they are, what they're about, what their morals are, what they've done, and they progress very quickly, and the film's over. And we kind of get that instant satisfaction as to, okay, who is this person? That didn't really happen with Connor's character. His character progression was so slow, and I think that was really interesting. I think that added to the lengthy feel of the film, and I really liked it because it added more suspense, it added more mystery. It wasn't just instant gratification and, oh, I know what's going on. You know, as an audience member, it was more entertaining that way.
You know, it's interesting you kind of talk about that, because I've seen this movie religiously since 1992, the first time I saw it. And I never really thought about his moral progression, but when you think about it, the first time you see him, he's just a guy watching wrestling who gets angry at the dude yelling at him.
Mm-hmm.
Then he goes down to the parking garage and cuts somebody's head off. And then, you know, he flashes back to a battle in the, 1600s or 1500s. And then he's speeding through a garage and acting like kind of a jerk to the cops. Not that the cops weren't jerks, but like, yeah, dude, you did just cut somebody's head off, and yeah, you are speeding in a, trying to get through. You take a swing at a cop, like it takes a long time to see him as a good person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting thought, because we really just, kind of like what I was saying about how until we had that World War II scene, we don't have him doing anything good. Like when you find out like he's an okay person, that's a interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I think that scene added a lot. If it wasn't there, I wouldn't have really thought he was a great person. Maybe, obviously he's fighting the bad guy, but he's also fighting to save his life. So it's like we could go either way with it. But I think that scene of him saving the girl, I think that really set him apart as that hero.
Yeah. And you got to love a dude with a pad like that. His apartment is the best.
Oh, that was incredible. Yeah, it was beautiful.
And I think every Highlander fan aspires to having like his little inner sanctum. And you had actually had some interesting comments about when they went into that room for the first time with Brenda. You want to kind of let everyone know what you thought?
Yeah, I thought the camera angle was really interesting on that. They shot from the ceiling down, and they actually spun around with Brenda as she walked around the room. And it was a little bit of a longer take. And it almost made me dizzy just watching it. I was like, wow, this is this is interesting. I've never really seen a take like that before. And I've never seen it done so dramatically. In most films that you see, if they try and do a unique shot like that, it doesn't really add to the story. It's kind of just like, oh, here's a cool shot. But this one seemed to add to the story. It seemed to have that symbolism of this is my world, coming from Connor's perspective. This is my world. It's like the world is spinning. That's kind of what I thought of when I saw that shot, and her walking around and like kind of walking past the memorials of his life, of his many past lives. And I thought that was really symbolic and just really dramatic. It was rich.
When it's interesting, we kind of talked about this before. She's probably the only person, mortal, that he's been around that would kind of understand everything in that room. As that historian, as that metallurgist, kind of an interesting person to bring in. And again, getting back to your description of the character, she's not just the girl. She's immensely qualified, and does a kind of a different role than we see in an action movie, especially in the 80s for women.
Yeah. Yep. And that's why I loved her character so much. That's why I was so surprised at the end when, she basically saved the day.
Yeah, because it very much could have been he rescues her, she gets out of the way, and he just does the heroic man thing, and she's like, "Oh, you're so wonderful." Sorry, that was my impression of
Exactly.
you, not of Roxanne Hart. I was a little off on that. So speaking of metallurgists, we got to move on to the only Scotsman in the movie about Scotsmen, or the main character, anyways. One Mr. Sean Connery playing Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, Chief Metallurgist to King Philip II of Spain. Now I'm at your service. What did you think of that character?
I think the movie would have not been the movie without his character. I mean, clearly, it was so over the top. I mean, even his costume was over the top. And I felt like even though his acting, it could have been perceived as over the top, it wasn't. It was so real. But he added so much joy and so much understanding to the film, because even up until that point, before we met that character, still no one knew what was going on. But he started to explain. At first, we kind of think maybe he's the villain. But after we see that happen, we can see he becomes kind of his mentor. And
Mm-hmm.
I think every film that has a mentor for the main character, it's a, I don't know, I might be biased, but I think that's a good film, because you just have that dynamic is essential, I think, for a lot of people's lives. And I think it really drove the story forward. I loved his character.
Well, and mentors are very awesome, very intelligent, and handsome people, and there should be more of them. Not that
Yes.
I'm saying I'm. Oh wait, yeah, I am. I definitely am. Sorry, it's getting dark here in my office, and I'm trying to deal with. I normally have these stupid fluorescent lights, which make me look like a zombie. Like I get the green skin, and because I have the heavy brow, I get all these shadows. So I do this. So I'm trying a new ring light today. It's not working as well as I thought, ladies and gentlemen. So sorry, I look like a mid 2000s horror movie this evening.
It kind of works,
But speaking of giant creepy guys jumping out of the dark, we got a bad guy here, the Kurgan. Now, I'm just going to let you take this away because I was really fascinated by your take on this.
Just his character overall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved his character. I loved and hated his character. Clearly, as the audience member, the one viewing it, I hated his character. But as an actor, as someone who's wanting to be entertained, I loved it. I think there's so many great moments that he had where he was able to kind of display that inner side that he had worked on as an actor that, I'm picking up on, and I'm sure other people in the audience have picked up on. His character progression was also a little slower. His almost didn't even happen until I thought the last half of the film, because he's just kind of this unknown. He kind of disappears after the Heather incident.
Yeah.
And we don't really know when he's going to pop up again. But when he does, he seems like the same character. And we don't really see any type of progression. We don't really see this unraveling until the very end. And it almost feels like it goes from 0 to 60 in just a couple of scenes. I thought that was so entertaining because it added to the suspense. It added to kind of the dread of the character. Like, who is this guy? Is he that intimidating? Is he someone that we should hate? And I don't think we really know that until the very end. A notable scene was in the chapel.
Mm-hmm.
At the very end, when he has shaved his head and he has safety pins all along his scar on his neck. I thought that scene, if we wanted to know if we should hate the Kurgan, we knew in that scene. We knew after that scene, okay.
Nuns, no sense of humor. Forgive me, Father, for I am a worm.
And then he licks his hand. It's just so gross. And it's like, if anyone had any doubts in their mind, if maybe he was kind of a good guy, I mean, it was completely obliterated in that scene. And I also think, him kind of changing his look was him embracing that wild animal side that kind of came out at the end. It seemed like, he started to unravel mentally and just became more animalistic and more savage at the very end. And I think that that was a really cool way to kind of display it, was just through his physical look. I also think them safety pinning that scar was a way of him kind of securing that he wouldn't be, that he wouldn't like come apart or maybe like fall apart fully. I don't know. I just felt like there's a lot of symbolism in that particular scene.
Yeah, and it's one that everyone kind of looks to. It's like that only real meeting between the two of them that we know of in the movie. Now, they had a comic book series a few years ago that kind of has them meeting in the 1800s, and then again a few years prior to this movie. But like that meeting of the mind, so that they're not just like, hey, I saw you on a battlefield and you killed my buddy while I was running errands. We don't really know why you leave this successful wealthy bachelor alone with your wife. But but yeah, like that interaction between them, it's an interesting choice to make in that movie, because they didn't necessarily have to,
Right.
but it also sets up, because they're talking to each other like this, how often had they talked before? What do they know about each other? Because it's not like, hey there, I'm Connor. You killed my buddy, you raped my wife. Let's just get that out of the way. How have you been, man? It's been what, 400 years? Like, how do you deal with that that drama?
Yeah, I think how the scene went, we could feel that throughout. I mean, it was a great scene. Another scene that I really liked was the fight between Sean Connery's character and the Kurgan when they're in the cobblestone home.
Oh,
and gosh, that was one of my favorite. I maybe that was my favorite fight scene. I don't know. There's there's so many good ones. But
you're starting to sound as indecisive as your sensei. That's kind of weird.
Oh, well, that's not good.
Yeah, you need a better role model, kid.
Oh man, shoot, I gotta go find one. That was my favorite, probably my favorite character fight, maybe, where we saw like some really cool character choices. Yeah. The reason I say that is because the first time that they start fighting up the stairs and they hit that first landing on the stairs, this is well before the very end of the fight. There's this look that the Kurgan gives him, and it's just a flash, but it's pure death. All you see is he is going to kill this character, and he is going to do it in this fight. And it was just this flash of the eyes. It was a split second. I almost missed it. But even at the very end, when the Kurgan goes to fully finish him off, I don't see that look. I didn't see the look of death in his eyes like I did before. I saw more of a look of satisfaction, from his kill. Again, that animalistic side kind of just coming out. But I thought that one flash of the eyes and that one look, that's the one time where I was actually thinking, I'm kind of scared of this character. I wasn't sure I was so afraid of him before. Yes, he was very creepy. But that was the point where I believed him.
Well, it's interesting because shortly before that, when they filmed Kurgan kind of breaking through the door and cutting the table in half, he missed his cue. And some debris went towards Sean Connery. And of course, it's his first time working with one of the biggest movie stars in the world. And Clancy Brown, the actor, was just terrified that he's going to lose his job and that, he almost hurt somebody. So he was like timid. So he's overcoming that to give this look that, shocked you in theaters, 36 years later. So that's pretty cool. Now, were you familiar with any of Clancy's work before that?
No.
Are you sure?
I don't know.
Are you familiar with a character named Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob SquarePants?
What?
That's him.
Not.
Yes,
What?
it is. It is. It really is. Isn't that crazy?
I don't know if I can. I don't know what to do with that information. That's so weird. How? Like,
Yeah. No, like I
in
just
the
want all of
world?
the characters in SpongeBob to be from Highlander.
Maybe they can do like a Highlander episode.
Oh my God, dude, that needs to happen. They did it on the Goldbergs. Do you ever watch that show? In their high school or their junior high, they have a Highlander club. And there's also a competing Highlander club. And it's unfair. So they go to the shop teacher, played by Clancy Brown, to see, like, can there be two Highlander clubs? And he says, no, there can be only one Highlander club. And it goes on, and it's absolutely wonderful.
That is awesome. I love it.
So yeah, and that just kills me every time. But any final thoughts on the Kurgan?
No, I again, I love seeing the slow burn progression of his character. And I thought he did it really well.
Well, very cool. Well, I think it's interesting. You know, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is because you're a first-time viewer of this film. And as an actor, as a martial artist, as somebody involved in film, you're offering us a unique perspective. Because I got involved in film in many ways because of this and a few other films that came out in that era. But you're already entrenched in it. You've got some miles under your belt for this. So I really appreciate you taking the time, meeting me here at Joe's, having yourself a nice glass of Glenmorangie, and telling us your story. Now, if people wanted to follow your career and become, super fans, how would they find you on the social medias?
You can follow me on Instagram at Christa Rose Media, and that's Christa with a CH. And you can find me.
That would be good, Christa. Evil Christa is with a K. So
that's actually true.
And also, oh God, that's so weird. In Highlander, like 9 times out of 10, the bad guy's name starts with K. It's Kurgan in this one, and the second one, it's Katana. It's Kane in the third one.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's all over. All over 6 seasons of the series. Like it's just constantly a K or a hard C. So yeah. So
on purpose.
It became a thing. You'd call immortals Emmys, but like the bad guys, you'd call them Kimmies. So. But yes, Evil Christa, there can be only one. So anyway, I apologize, I interrupted you there to talk about our friend. But they can follow you on Instagram at Christa Rose
Media.
Yep.
And then Facebook is just my name, Christa Rose.
Now, you're forgetting a very important Instagram account.
What would that one be?
Well, this would be the one. Well, it's dedicated to certain friends of yours. Probably the only friends you have smaller than you.
That's true. They're very furry, adorable friends. I have a squirrel Instagram page, and I take pictures of my squirrels in my backyard and on my deck, and it's very entertaining. So if you ever want to follow, that's at Squirrel Friends, FERENZ.
And the squirrels have their own picnic table. It's amazing. It's
they do, and there's music. I'll put music to their videos.
It's pretty fantastic. I always enjoy that.
All right, that was awesome, Lee.
I look like I'm about to sneeze.
Oh, that was really, really cool getting a first-time perspective of Highlander. But I got to tell you, seeing her reaction and finding out Mr. Crab's real voice and who did it was pretty funny.
I was holding that one in. I just wanted to. I almost said it at the screening, but I'm like, no, I want to drop this bomb because she has these great reactions. They're all. It's what makes her such a great actress. But I was just really glad that she was not familiar.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Now first of all, I want you to make sure you let Krista know. Thank her so much for letting her become on Bloody Kings, letting her let us record her, and I appreciate you so much doing that video with her. And I hope she enjoys seeing this. Um, you seeing it on the big screen. I want you to kind of give your own testimony of the experience itself.
It is a very different experience. Every frame of this movie is something I'm familiar with, but seeing it that large, certain shots, the final fight in the warehouse under Tin Cup, when they got that big sweeping camera move past the that big block of blue windows, is uh, one. And honestly, the that superimposed shot of the Kurgan and Candy. Hi,
Right.
I'm Candy. Of course you are. Like, you don't understand how cool that looks until it's 15 feet tall.
That
It
is
is
so
just
cool.
this. It's seeing it on the big screen lets you really revel in how rich and beautiful it is. And that transition that I was talking about, where Connor turns into the Mona Lisa. Oh my
Right.
God, that's stunning. Uh, it's it's like seeing it for the first time, or seeing. You know what? I think probably the closest it's going to be is in a couple weeks when you see Aaron. You'll be like, "Oh, I remember just how awesome you look."
Right. Right.
Like, you're going to have
Yeah.
that kind of. It's probably going to be better when you see Aaron, your fiance that you haven't seen in 2 years, because damn COVID. But yeah, it was a visceral experience seeing it on the big screen, and I hope you get to do it, brother.
Yeah, I want to just experience the sound as well, because I'm a stickler for good sound when it comes to movies and concerts as well, and that's one thing that I want to, especially when you got that Queen soundtrack, you know,
Hmm.
supporting this film, and in some cases, sometimes people feel like carrying this film because if you don't have this Queen soundtrack, it's not the same movie at all. And that's just one of the things that I hope I get to experience in my lifetime. And I would like to see the big 4K release. Was that what you saw? Was the 4K release?
I believe so. It was as crisp and beautiful as you could imagine. I don't know that it's possible to make that print look any better, but
Yeah.
I've seen it happen a couple times now.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank Christa Rose. Thank you so much for wanting to and willing to experience this movie, and um, giving your thoughts on it. And Lee, thank you so much for following through with her and getting the interview. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, and it was really fun. I loaned her one of my microphones, and I'd also like to thank her husband, who was the one driving in that horrible, horrible blizzard I mentioned, and him coming out, watching the movie, and he also, seemed to really like it. He was laughing along with me, so good dude. But Andrew Gullickson, you're awesome.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's go ahead and let's close things out here. All right. Thank you guys for listening and watching now. If you're listening to this, you can also watch it here on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel, this Bloody Kings episode. And please subscribe and share and comment and hit like. We'd very much appreciate that. Our master feed for all of our audio podcasts can be found on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. And the Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, which includes Apple Podcast and iTunes. Also, too, you can find Blood of Kings on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to check out all of our past audio podcast, go on to fpnet.podbean.com and just click that button at the top, and it will categorize all of our shows, and just click on Blood of Kings and you will see all of our audio podcasts there. We've got a lot now. We've done even though we're on whatever episode this is, we've done a lot more. We've done some specials back in the day. So make sure you check that out if you're interested. Please also, if you are a Facebook person, please join our Blood of Kings, a fandom group there on Facebook. Just search us out, Blood of Kings, Highlander fandom group, and we'll get you in there. We also have our sister page, Blood of Kings, a Highlander CCG collectible card game and gaming discussion group page for all of you Highlander collectible card game collectors and players. And if you'd like to contact us directly, you can email us at bloodofkingspodcast@gmail.com. My name is Kevin Reitzel. I am on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix. Lee Fillingsness, where can we find you on the socials?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at The Way of the Way, and you can find me under my name on Facebook.
Awesome. 2 ways you can support us here. First of all, please head on over to your podcast platforms and search Fandom Podcast Network and leave a review for Blood of Kings. We, of course, would love 5-star reviews, but we would love feedback in general. And you can also support us by heading over to our TeePublic store for Blood of Kings. Search Fandom Podcast Network or Blood of Kings, and you can get our Blood of Kings logos on any of your favorite apparel. Again, special thanks to Christa Rose. Appreciate you very much for watching the movie, first of all, and giving us your firsthand opinion. We very, very much appreciate it, Christa. Thank you.
Yeah, we totally appreciate you.
What's that, Lee?
I said, good Christa. We appreciate you.
Yes. I'm Kevin, and on behalf of Lee, thanks everyone for listening, and join us again next time here on the Fandom Podcast Network for another episode of Blood of Kings, a Highlander podcast. That sensation you are feeling is the quickening. We are one. We are immortals.
Farewell, dear shitheads.
Goodbye, everyone.